Well, hot on the heels of a visit to Russia earlier this month, South African President Jacob Zuma will lead a state visit to China next week. The aim is to strengthen political, economic and trade relations with the country that's become the world's second largest economy. It's also become South Africa's largest trading partner. Busa CEO Jerry Vilakazi is part of that delegation heading to China. He joins me in studio now. Jerry, thanks very much for coming in today. Developing countries, the BRIC countries in particular, Brazil, Russia, India, China, seem to hold all the trump cards as far as growth prospects are concerned going forward from here. Is it important or crucial that South Africa does strengthen ties with these countries?
Very important, especially after the global economic crisis. We know that all indications are that the countries in the north in Europe, the US, are still going to be struggling probably for the next coming 18 months to 2 years. But there are indications that the growth trajectory in the emerging markets, especially the BRIC economies, are becoming very significant players in the economy. But Africa also, it's holding its own, because if you look at the IMF report, World Bank report, they are all looking at if you look at the top 20 growing economies currently and over the next coming 2 to 3 years, 15 of them are coming from Africa. So you can see that I think it's very important for us to look at those new markets. China, 1.3 billion people, it does offer a lot to South Africa.
Of course, we know Africa has close to 1 billion people. So when China strengthens ties with South Africa, is it really doing that to strengthen ties with Africa? Because we know that lots of companies and countries use South Africa as a springboard into the continent.
It is very important, especially because China has always been criticized for taking a lot of raw materials from Africa, from the continent. But if you look at the approach that as a country, South Africa, we've taken in the past few years, has essentially been to say to China, let's form partnerships. Let's look at how do we leverage the strengths that you have and that we have. We have mineral resources, but as a country, we do not want just to be exporters of raw materials.
Which is what we're doing at the moment, isn't it?
Exactly. So if we're going to get a balance in our trade deficit that we have at the moment, we need to make sure that the partnership leads to China investing in productive capacity here, leads to us being able to leverage the technology for value add, so that by the time we export the goods, we have added value, we've manufactured. They are a strong manufacturing economy at the moment globally. They control manufacturing. And if our industrial strategy to create jobs, more labor-intensive economic growth is going to succeed, we need the technology, the expertise of China.
Yeah, but it's not really in China's interest to have us as a strong manufacturing nation, because they would rather export manufactured goods to us and take our raw materials. How do we play that? Are we taking holistic views when we go on these state visits that tie in with the Department of Trade and Industry's growth and development plans as well, with the whole trade and industry focus going forward?
I think it is important. That is the message that we continue to communicate ourselves as Busa and South African business in particular, because it is to China's interest to build capacity in this continent. It is to China's interest because if you look, the African population is projected over the next coming 40 years to reach 1.8 billion. We would be bigger than the Chinese economy in the next 40 years, but also with an advantage of a young population, while many economies have an aging population. But also one of the experiences of the global economic crisis is that it is very important in our pursuit of multilateral trade to ensure that there is equality of movement of goods and persons between economies. And it is in the interest of China to ensure that we close that gap in the deficit of exports versus imports.
Are trips like the one next week mainly ceremonial political trips? I know there is a large business delegation going as well, lots of government ministers, yourself. Does deals actually get signed, or is it really just ceremonial?
They do. We must also recognize that in between some of these visits, business people do go into those countries, and some of them use this opportunity to actually sign those deals. And it is for that reason, for instance, if you look at the program that we have, we will have an opportunity where a few companies that we've been informed of will be signing deals and agreements in the presence of President Zuma in China. We've seen that happening before, but others will be able to make contacts, networks, find new potential partners, and thereafter pursue. No, it does work. We have seen that in previous occasions. But the fact that we go with government, there are other serious discussions that take place and agreements that get signed government to government, which create an enabling environment, because that's what we expect from the president more than anything else. The president must engage with his counterpart in China to address the regulatory issues, to address those issues that becomes obstacles to more investment flow and trade flow.
Well, you're talking about agreements being signed, and I see something called a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement is going to be signed between the two premiers. The first such agreement concluded by China and any other company, reportedly. What's the significance of that? What does this agreement do?
Because of the influence of China globally, whether it's in the UN and in other international platforms, and the role and responsibility that South Africa has in the continent as a government, I think that framework, that agreement does provide a global framework in terms of the support and the relationship at global platforms for the initiatives and the pursuit of certain objectives that we have a responsibility of as a country, both at political level but also at economic level, because you will know that as South Africa, we are the largest investor in the continent as a country. Our companies operate in most of the countries in the continent. 50% of Africa's buying power is found in South Africa. We contribute a quarter of the continent's GDP. So it's very significant for us to ensure that we form that partnership with China as a country.
Well, I think you were on that Russian trip earlier this month. Tell me, what came out of that? Have we seen any agreements signed there? Have we seen business growing with Russia subsequent to that trip?
It's 2 weeks. We've just come back 2 weeks ago. We know that at government level there were a number of agreements that have been signed, but we also know that there are companies that went there to strengthen already existing relationships, because there are companies from Russia that are investing in South Africa. Similarly, South African companies that are active in Russia. So there was a strengthening of relationships, but more specifically, we were able to reaffirm the role of the Russia-South Africa Business Council, whose responsibility is to ensure that we advance and promote more trade and investment between our two countries. We haven't as yet received feedback from some of the delegates. Some of the companies do come back to us, and we do expect that they will come back to us and tell us what are the successes that have been made.